It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Welcome to episode 623 of the Rico Brogna. Hi, I'm Evan Roberts. Hopefully everybody's enjoying their beautiful weekend or early Monday morning if you listen to us on your Monday commute, which you may not have because it is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Either way, welcome into Rico Brogna. A lot to discuss. We will continue to analyze the decision to bring in Bo Bichette, the impact it has on the Mets lineup, what's next in terms of the outfield, in terms of starting pitching, and other ramifications from the move that was made and what we should expect the Mets to do next. Let's put a bow. I didn't mean to do that, but let's put a bow on the Bichette negotiations as well as the Kyle Tucker loss, because I think we're almost forgetting already that the Mets tried to get Kyle Tucker on a short-term contract, and that was their first choice. Their first choice was clearly to sign Kyle Tucker on a mega short-term contract. If they had won that negotiation, there never would have been a Bo Bichette pivot. So I think we have to accept, right or wrong, the Mets' first choice was Kyle Tucker. And it's easy to understand why just on the surface. I mean, the fit is smoother. One man is an outfielder. The other one is going to be a converted shortstop, which creates all sorts of questions about the rest of the Mets' defensive alignment. Now, they're very different kind of hitters. I think one aspect of Bo Bichette that you're starting to like, you're starting to think about, you're starting to maybe rationalize, because this is what we do as fans. Even if we don't like something, even if we're not in love with the offseason, none of us want to go on an opening day thinking everything's going to suck. But one of the aspects of Bo Bichette that's appealing is that he's a gamer. That, fair or not, and this is probably unfair, but it's the interpretation I would have and many you would have, is that there's less of a concern in Bo Bichette handling New York and handling the pressure of this town than Kyle Tucker. That may not even be true, because you never know how a player responds to the pressures of New York, but I think that's a stereotype we probably all have. And that would have been a worry upon signing Kyle Tucker, which I accepted. I had mentioned on previous Ricos that I was willing to take that risk. Sometimes in free agency, you have to take risks like that. And I think in the case of Bo Bichette, and maybe it's what he's done in big spots, maybe it's the fact he's a son of a major leaguer, maybe it's the fact he just appears to have that grinded out dog DNA in him. He feels like someone who, if he struggles in New York, it would be over injuries. It would not be over not handling the spotlight. The other thing we can digest on are what the offers were made to both Kyle Tucker and Bo Bichette, and not just what they accepted and turned down, but if this is a sign in free agency moving forward. So, for example, Kyle Tucker's offer from the Blue Jays, and we all knew in the final days leading into Kyle Tucker's decision that he was getting a long-term offer from Toronto and a couple of mega money short-term offers from the Mets and the Dodgers. We had broken that down now for what feels like weeks. My worry, and it turned out to be true, was he's either going to take the long-term deal, or if the money is similar between the Mets and the Dodgers, we're not winning. We're not winning with Kyle Tucker, and we're probably not winning with just about anybody else in baseball if the money and the years and the offers are similar to the LA Dodgers. And those were my two worries. Ultimately, it turned out not to be the long-term offer worry. It was the Dodger worthy. But getting back to the Blue Jays, reportedly their offer to Kyle Tucker was a 10-year, $350 million deal, which is, I would use the word slightly below what the expectation was for Tucker in free agency. We all figured he was going to get a long-term deal. And I think those long-term deals probably fell anywhere between 9 to 12 years. I think that would have been the guess. So he ends up with 10. As far as AAV, maybe we figured 40 instead of 35, but it was going to be a high AAV that was not going to match Juan Soto, especially off of the season he came off of. So the one long-term offer he got, or at least the one long-term offer he got that we're aware of, was not that far off from what we projected going into the offseason. It was off, but I don't think it was super off. Like, it's not as if he wasn't getting a 10-year offer. But the question I have around Tucker, and I'll include Bo Bichette in this, because the reported offer that came from Philadelphia was like an 8-year, $200 million deal, which was a lower AAV, but another long-term contract. Are free agents, and maybe it's certain free agents, but are free agents going to be more enticed by a short-term, insanely high AAV over the long-term security of a good contract, and both offers to Bichette and Tucker protect you for the rest of your career, but it also locks you in. And if you're productive, and this is the case with both players, and Bo Bichette and Kyle Tucker, and of course, this is me saying this, not knowing what the next CBA looks like. I'm going to play under the idea that the CBA may be similar. There isn't going to be a hard salary cap. If you are productive and healthy, you will make up the years and the money that you turn down, because Tucker and Bichette are making so much money over the next couple of years, if they choose to, because obviously Bo has an opt-out, that getting the money or remaking the money that you turned down from Toronto and Philadelphia should not be that difficult if you're productive. If you're not productive, and that's the risk, if you Anthony Rendon the situation, absolutely this could come back and haunt you. But are we moving into a world in which players are going to be more drawn in by that? And it could be a case-by-case basis, because I think when you look at Tucker and Bichette, there were reasons different for both on why they may not have been offered their maximum value. In Tucker's case, it's the last 2 years. It's just the production. It's the fact that he missed half the year 2 years ago. It's the fact that he fell off a little bit in the second half last year with Chicago and just didn't have his best season. It just didn't. I mean, you look at the numbers. They're good. They're fine. They were not mega contract fine. And we all know the deal. You come off a big year, they just have a better chance of making the big time money. So I think in Tucker's case, the last 2 years pretty much explained why he came, I still like to use the word slightly, but below what the expectation was for him going into free agency, specifically a year ago. In the case of Bo Bichette, I think the reason he didn't cash out, despite being young and despite coming off a really good year and despite coming off of a year in which he returned in the World Series and had huge hits and produced at a high level, I think is the uncertainty of his position. Like Bo Bichette for the Phillies and certainly for the Mets was moving to a new position. And we'll go deeper into this in a second, why we think the transition will work. It's still a transition. There is still the unknown of what Bo Bichette is defensively at the new position he's going to take. In the Mets case, at third base. In some cases, second base, the position he started to shift towards last year when he returned in the World Series for Toronto. But I think Bichette is young enough, and Tucker is young enough, but Bichette more specifically because he's younger and he can opt out after 1 year, while Kyle Tucker has to wait a second year before he opts out. Bo Bichette has a monster year this year. Bo Bichette has Gold Glove defense at third base. Then it is absolutely on the table that next year in a free agency that's not going to feature a lot of great position players, he has a chance to go bank. And I'll give you a crazy prediction right off the top. And Met fans, this is good news, because even though it means Bichette's only here for a year, it means he would have had a huge 2026. If Bo Bichette produces at his potential and let's say has a career season or close to career season, he is 310. He hits 25 home runs. He drives in 100 runs, and he transitions successfully to third base. He could be looking at a 10-year contract next year. And maybe that 10-year contract is at $350 million. Maybe he's looking at the offer that Tucker got from Toronto. And that leads me into this, hey, are you so sure he's going to opt out after 1 year question? If Bo Bichette is productive, that's the real question here. How does he produce in 2026? And hopefully he produces at a high level because it helps us. He's going to opt out. If he has a bad year, if he is injured and misses a big part of the year, then he may not opt out. Now, follow up, because I'm sure you're thinking this right now. But Evan, what about the lockout? Does the lockout affect his decision to opt in and opt out? Here's why I don't think it affects it. Bo Bichette has to decide on opting out well before the lockout begins, well before negotiations probably begin, or real negotiations begin. So I would guess that Bo Bichette will have the same information next November that we have now, which is, who knows what the new CBA is going to look like. It's not as if Bichette and others can opt out on January 10th of next season. They have to make that decision right after the World Series. So I really don't think the fear of a lockout or even the fear of what will a new contract look like is going to impact it. I think what's going to impact it is simply the year he has. Now, before we get to some of your Bo Bichette related email, and we will look at the starting pitching market and what I advise that the Mets should do next, and even the outfield market, I want to go back to November, and we did this with Jorge Polanco. So on these Ricos back in November, we did deep dives of free agency, deep dives of the starting pitching market. We talked about everybody in free agency and tried to put our hat on and say, how do they fit the Mets? We did this with Jorge Polanco, where after the Mets signed him, we played a short clip of what we said about Polanco back in November. And I'll summarize real quick. We liked him as a player. We just wondered about the fit, which here we are months later, kind of the same situation. Now, we like Polanco as a player. He's coming off a good year, switch hitter, get all that. What's his fit? And as we sit here today, his fit is he's going to learn first base, and we better like it. Let us go back to November, and we'll play you a quick clip of me imagining a world in which we got the news that the Mets have signed Bo Bichette. All of a sudden, we get the shocking announcement the Mets have signed Bo Bichette. I think we'd be excited to be acquiring a player of that caliber. I just don't love the fit. I think that Ronnie Mauricio still has great potential and deserves a shot. Jet Williams hasn't even gotten that shot at the major league level. Brett Beatty is coming off a really good year at third base. This is not me prospect hugging because, trust me, I want the Mets to add some of the free agents we're going to talk about. I just don't know if the guy who's probably lined up to be a second baseman, third baseman is the way to go. You know, it's funny listening to that months later. I think we all kind of feel the same way about Bo Bichette. Hell of a player. We'd love to add him to the lineup, but we wonder about the fit. And I think what's changed, and I explained this on the pivot, Rico, after we lost Kyle Tucker, why I pivoted to wanting Bo Bichette is even if he isn't the best fit, and I think everything I said there, I still stand by to a degree, you need to add a bat. The bat was more important at this point than the fit was. Kyle Schwarber's not here anymore. Pete Alonso is not here anymore. Kyle Tucker, not here anymore. So when you looked at the bats you could add realistically, instead of making fake trades up for Fernando Tatis Jr., which I wish will happen and maybe someday will, the most realistic pivot point was Bo Bichette. As far as the prospects I mentioned, here's where I stand on that. Number one, I never imagined back in November that if the Mets did sign Bo Bichette, it would essentially be to a one-year deal. I'm stunned by that. And I think if we could have gone back into a time machine and relitigated Bo Bichette as a one-year deal, which essentially this is, maybe it's a 2-year deal, maybe it's a 3-year deal. But again, if it's a 3-year deal, things didn't work out. We want it to be a 1-year deal because it means he performed. I would have thought about it differently in regards to Mauricio and Jet Williams and Brett Beatty, because the fact that he's only going to be here for a year, or I think it's likely he's only here for a year, doesn't mean you should be in a rush to trade those guys away. It, I think, allows them opportunities elsewhere at different positions. In the case of Ronnie Mauricio, I think he should still continue to play third base in the minors, play second base in the minors. I think if Mauricio ends up here, let's say he hits at a high level down in the minor leagues, assuming he's not traded, I think Ronnie Mauricio could end up being the DH with an eye on replacing Bo Bichette next year, with an eye on eventually replacing Marcus Semien at second base. So the Mets still have 3 more years of him under contract. So I think in the case of Mauricio, I talk about him specifically. This season clearly begins in the minor leagues. If he hits at a high level, I think he can hit his way here, assuming there are no injuries, to a DH role. The other thing I would do with Ronnie Mauricio in the minor leagues is also teach him first base. The Mets are in the process of teaching a lot of guys first base, whether it's Jorge Polanco or it's Brett Beatty. But what's different with Mauricio is he's going to be in the minor leagues, or at least he should be in the minor leagues. There's a reason why David Stearns sat there last year and kept his ass on the roster for so long, so they didn't exhaust that option, something you, Hoff, complained about. Well, guess what? As we sit here today, thank God they did it, because it would be a tricky spot if Ronnie Mauricio was out of options right now. But I think he should go to the minor leagues, play third base, second base, and first base. Maybe one of those roles opens up this upcoming season if there's injury or severe underperformance. but DH is probably where he would fit short term. In the case of Jet Williams, I view him as an outfielder now. And I think that's the way the Mets have to view him, especially considering they don't exactly have a lot of depth in their outfield. So when I talked about those young players, and Luis Angel Acuna too, assuming these guys are still on the roster by the time we get to spring training and opening day, that's how I would view them. And it's funny, when they traded for Semien and they made the Nimmo Semien trade, that was one of my first concerns. What about the kids? What about the guys who very well could have competed for a second base job? And I think the answer to all that is they're outfielders, or at least in the case of Jet Williams and Luis Angel Acuna, they are. Now, let me read a couple of your emails on Bo, and I promise we'll get to the starting pitching. We'll get to how they could fill out the rest of the outfield. Kyle writes a very in-depth email about Bo's defense and how he thinks it will translate to him moving to third base. So I will read it, and hopefully we can all learn a thing or two. Kyle writes, guys, my family and I are longtime listeners of the pod, first time emailing. Well, we appreciate it. I did some research into Bichette's OOA numbers at shortstop, outs above average. OOA numbers are broken up into 4 categories for shortstops, depending on which direction a play needs to be made. Towards the shortstop third base hole, shades towards second base bag, straight up and up the middle. Last year, Bichette was a minus 13 at shortstop. For reference, Lindor on a down year was worth plus 5. So that gives you perspective that Bichette defensively at shortstop was abysmal, according to OOA. When you break down his OOA by 4 categories above, it's the following: toward shortstop and third base, minus 11, shaded towards second base bag, minus 1, straight up, minus 2, up the middle, 0. While plays to third baseman's right are important, they are less common than plays to a shortstop's right. I don't think it's a huge logical leap to assume most, if not all, of these minus 11 OOA will go away having Bo at third base. Does this make him a good defender? No, but possibly a league average one. This makes me feel even better about this signing because it's a clear sign of the front office thinking outside the box to turn a negative defender into possibly an average or positive one. I hope you're right. You know, I've gotten a lot of emails over the last few days pushing back on the notion, not necessarily as much at third base, but a lot at first base, saying, Evan, just because Polanco hasn't played the position doesn't mean he's a downgrade from Pete Alonso. I want to make it very clear. I am not saying it's definitely going to be a downgrade, because the truth is I have no idea what Polanco is going to be at first base. And the positiveness of not knowing what a guy's going to be at first base is just that. I can't assume he's going to be bad, but you can't assume he's going to be good. You can't assume that because Pete Alonso was a below league average defender at first base, according to OOA, that, well, Polanco can't possibly be worse. We don't know that. The guy's never played the position. So I'm not guaranteeing you he's going to be worse. I've mentioned that Wilson Contreras has made the transition. Bryce Harper's made the transition. We've seen guys do it and do it at a high level, but you're talking about improving your defense. You can't guarantee the defense is improved at first base. Back to Bo Bichette's defense. Adam writes, I would move Bo to second base and have double play combo of Lindor and Bichette, which would be amazing. Then I would move Marcus Semien to third base because he's getting older and on the decline. Key thing, Adam, is that even though Marcus Semien's offensive numbers are on the decline, the defensive metrics disagree with you in terms of him declining at second. Semien is a good enough athlete where you could move him to third base, and I think he'd be fine over there. He's played some third base in his major league career. But I don't know if you want to have another position that features someone who didn't play it last year. Because if you do that, now you're looking at third, second, first, possibly left, all with guys, even if it's not horribly out of position, slightly out of position. Speaking of Bo Bichette and his future here, Mark writes, I know you said it's likely Bo only stays 1 year, but when he has to opt out for the 2027 season and it's going to be in limbo, I think it makes sense to take the second year, opt out then, and take the $5 million bonus. I guess he could do that. My point earlier is that we're not going to have any new information about the lockout. Like, I don't think we're going to sit here in October and know more about the severity of it. Like, we all assume there's going to be a lockout. We don't know how long it's going to be. We don't know if it's going to impact any major league games. during the last work stoppage, and it was bad. We forget how bad it felt when Rob Manfred stood there and said, we're canceling games. There was a moment in which we didn't know if we were going to have baseball until June or July, or have baseball at all. Ultimately, they settled, and we ended up not missing a game, even if the season got pushed and smushed together. I don't think by the time that opt-out decision is made, we're going to know more. But could Bo Bichette make the family decision and say, you know what? I'm guaranteed another $42 million. Screw it. I'll stay another year. I guess it's possible. I'm merely betting that he's going to opt out off of a good year. I'll tell you what else this means. It means that if your kids are excited about the Bo Bichette signing, if you've said to them, yeah, it sucks Pete's gone, we'll always love Pete Alonso, but yay, we got Bo Bichette, do yourself a favor and not buy the jersey. Because there's a real good chance that Bo Bichette's only for a year and then he's gone. And I was thinking about this the other day because I was taking my youngest son to his baseball practice, and he was wearing his Francisco Lindor jersey. He's only 5, and he says, is Lindor still on the team? And I said, yes, he is. It's Pete Alonso, it's Brandon Nimmo, it's Jeff McNeil. And I explained on the car ride our new players, and he was asking great questions, and one of which is, can I get a Bo Bichette jersey? And my response was, I only think he's going to be here for a year. Do you want the jersey of a player who may be gone after a year? Now, baseball is a funny game, right? And as much as we think we know what David Stearns and Steve Cohen want, is it possible that Bo Bichette has a monster year? He fits so well in New York that David Stearns makes an exception for Bichette and gives him a 9-year deal? I guess. I just wouldn't bet on it. I just wouldn't bank on it. I said this when the Mets traded for Cespedes back in 2015 to Joe, and I obviously turned out to be wrong because they brought him back first on that 3-year opt-out laden deal, and then eventually brought him back on the long-term contract, which didn't work out. I said, Yoenis Cespedes is a one-night stand. You bring him in, you hope he takes you to the dance, which he sort of did. I mean, he took our team to the freaking World Series, and they don't go there without Yoenis Cespedes. And that's it. And I was surprised, especially in the Wilpon era, that they did bring him back. I think a lot of it was fan pressure. I think a lot of it was the market never really developed for him. David Stearns is not going to fall to fan pressure. I can tell you that right now. But would he look at a guy who's 29 years old after one big year in New York, assuming that happens, and say, I'll give him a 9-year deal? I guess. I just wouldn't bank on it. So think twice before you get your kids a Bo Bichette jersey is the point. Kevin writes, this is the least excited about the Mets I've ever been in my life. We're not retooling and we're not rebuilding. We're simply a weaker team. Stearns has not only played with fire, he has dared fire. He gambled with the devil, and now he's left with Jack High with no more cards. That said, the most depressing thing might be the owner. Why bother getting excited about Carson Bench? He'll be gone in 6 to 7 years. If you can't keep Pete, who can you keep? I'm positive that Babe Ruth wasn't playing great defensive right field in 1926 when he was 31 years old. I'm also positive that Stearns and Cohen would have gotten rid of him at his age because his lack of defense and speed wasn't worth the 40 home runs, 120 RBIs he'd average over the next 7. We currently have a 75-win team, and the shelves at the baseball store are empty. What a joke. Are they a better team than last year? My answer off the top would be no, so I'm not going to argue with that. The beauty about are they a better team or not is so many variables that can change to make this a good team. And I completely disagree about being as negative going into a season as you can remember. I mean, do you not remember 2011, 2012, 2013, and really 2014? Do you not even remember 2020? Or what other year should I throw at you? 1996, if you're a little bit older. And I've said this before. I may not love the offseason. I may not love the final product of the roster, but there are more than enough reasons to at least convince yourself of hope for this upcoming season, especially if you compare it to some of the down seasons we've had. One last email, and then we'll go deeper into the outfield and the starting pitching situation. Noah writes, help me out here. You've repeatedly said if Marcus Semien has a bounce-back season offensively, what makes you think he will? To my untrained eyes, he's a 35-year-old second baseman, a position that ages badly, with a sub-700 OPS 2 seasons in a row. Are there underlying metrics that indicate he's due for a positive regression? Or are we just assuming that David Stearns wouldn't put him in there if he thought he was cooked offensively? I'll tell you why I believe there is a fighter's chance that Marcus Semien has a bounce back year. And no, it's not trusting that David Stearns saw something. Marcus Semien comes to the Mets with a reputation. One of the reputations he has is that he outworks everybody. He's one of the hardest working guys in all of baseball. You hear some of his former teammates swear by the work ethic of Marcus Semien. I think when you have a player like that and the pride that he has, and I am not suggesting he's ever going to match his career seasons, but I think the idea that he can have a sub-7 or a plus 750 OPS year, a 240 year, a 25 home run season, again, not career numbers, but clearly better than a year ago. I don't think that's crazy. I don't think it's crazy that he can produce one more positive season offensively, especially if you compare it to a year ago. And maybe I am being too positive, or maybe it's trusting the work ethic of Marcus Semien at 35 years old. I would take any bet that he will produce better numbers than a year ago. And what I have going for me is that his numbers a year ago were terrible. I can't deny that. But do I think he'll hit better than 230? Yes. Do I think he'll have an OPS better than 670? Yes. Do I think he'll hit more than 15 home runs? Yes. Now, do I think he's going to match 2021 when he hit 45 home runs and drove in 100 runs? No. But I think he can be better than last year. And I will give you one quick example, Hoff. George Springer. George Springer was cooked. There was no evidence that George Springer had a bounce back year in him. And last year with the Toronto Blue Jays, he was unbelievable at 35 years old. And I don't, for a second, think Marcus Semien could do that. Just real quick, George Springer's last 3 seasons saw a decline in OPS from 814, 732 to 2024 when he had a 1.1 WAR at a 674 OPS. This past season with Toronto at 35 years old, he hit 309 with 32 home runs, 84 RBIs, and a 960 OPS, essentially the second best season of his career. And that was after dealing with injuries and dealing with ineffectiveness. So I wouldn't go that far. I don't expect that from Semien, but I do think he is capable of a bounce back season compared to what it was a year ago.
And it's funny with these veteran players. Sometimes I feel like they go to this after a really bad season, they can find a way to bounce back and like have an every other end of their career. So this could be it. Plus the fact is, and this is kind of like been hidden a little bit, he's reuniting with Bo Bichette. They seem to be really good teammates. So, I mean, maybe there's something between Bo Bichette and Marcus Semien's work ethic. Like, that's what I've heard about Bo Bichette. He's a machine. Like, maybe those two together, they find something and it clicks.
That is one positive to the recalibration of this Met team, even if you don't like the moves compared to what they lost. We all will never forget what Tommy Pham said about the locker room. And this is not necessarily about Alonso and Nimmo. I don't have no idea who it was about when Tommy Pham said it was the least hardworking locker room he had ever seen. And I don't know who he was talking about. I think we all assumed it was Jeff McNeil. It was not Pete Alonso. It was not Lindor. In fact, I think he specifically said it's not Lindor and it's not Alonso. So I don't want Pete to continue to get the shrapnel from this. I'm just pointing out that the Mets are very different. And two of the guys they added are known, and Polanco too, by the way, they're known as great leaders and hard workers. And that's all great. It's got to lead to production, obviously, but at least they do come here with that reputation. As far as the outfield is concerned, because they obviously need to add an outfielder. I could sit here all day and talk about how I want a real first baseman. I think it's likely they're not going to add a real first baseman. I've talked about Christian Walker as a suggestion that maybe the Mets and the Astros can meet up on some kind of salary fairness in which they take back the last 2 years of Walker's deal, and maybe it's Kodai Senga or something of the sorts that goes back to Houston. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the Mets look at Beatty and they look at Polanco and they say, that's what we're going to do at first base. What they clearly are going to do, to the level I'm not sure, is add an outfielder. Pat Ragazzo, who's a hell of a reporter, I like Pat, reported that the Mets are still in on Cody Bellinger. I don't think he's wrong, but I still think there's no chance they get him. Is that a hypocrisy in my part? No. the Mets are still calling Scott and being like, yeah, so what's up with Cody? Yeah, 5 years? Oh, okay. Yeah, we're willing to go 1 or 2 years. High AAV, which maybe they're still willing to do. Maybe the Mets, not to the extent of Tucker or the extent of Bichette, but maybe the Mets would be willing to give Cody Bellinger a 1-year deal at $42 million a year. I don't think that would be enough. I think Cody is going to want the long-term contract coming off a good year, especially being 32 years old. So I don't dismiss the report that the Mets aren't still involved. I just don't think they're seriously involved. I don't think they're seriously involved enough to go to 5 or 6 years. They have shown no indication of doing that with anybody, let alone with a guy in his 30s. I think it's more if somehow the market collapses, if the Yankees move on, and I'm not sure how the Yankees could truly move on, signing Harrison Bader, I guess that would be a way of moving on, and the market collapsed. The Mets could wait on a short-term contract, but I don't think they are involved in Cody Bellinger to a serious standpoint. Why don't we get back to the name I just mentioned? That's Harrison Bader. What is his market? I'd love to know. Because, Hoff, as much as I've ridiculed him as a fourth outfielder, I tip my hat to what he did last year. He had a great year with Minnesota, a great run with Philadelphia upon the trade. I've always marveled at his defense. And considering the situation the Mets are in right now, where they are relying on youth, maybe more than one guy. We hear about Carson Bench. It may have to be Jet Williams too, especially considering they don't have multiple outfielders right now, unless you consider Tyrone Taylor an everyday outfielder, which he is not. Would Harrison Bader make sense here right now? And one of the appealing points you could give to Harrison is, hey, if you come here and produce, you're an everyday player. Because we don't have guys taking the job from you. Even Carson Bench. If you sign Harrison Bader tomorrow and say you're the center fielder, you now have Tyrone Taylor, Carson Bench, and Jet Williams competing for left field with Bader locked in at center. And if Bader performs, he's really not at a major risk to losing his job. If he does lose his job, it would be because of underperformance, and it would be because multiple young players performed at a high level. I am warming up to the possibility of Bader. And the other thing about Bader is, as much as he may want a multi-year deal, is it out there? We're sitting in the middle of January right now. He is coming off a good year. I think a lot of teams may view Bader more similarly to me than you, Hoff, which is, he's good. He's coming off a good year. He's probably a fourth outfielder. So could the Mets bring Bader in on a 2-year opt-out after one, let's call it $15 million a year. So let's say 2 years, $30 million, opt-out after year one. It makes sense. And I'm probably more drawn in by that than even Austin Hayes. And you look at the other remaining outfielders. Bader seems like an easy transition. You could also go Robert Jr. We've talked about him endlessly. The problem is it's not as simple as signing someone. You have to make a trade. I don't know what the White Sox are asking for. And at this point, especially if I'm paying Robert Jr. $20 million coming off of 2 bad seasons in a row, I'm not giving you a lot. You want me to take that contract? Fine. If I take that contract, I ain't giving you big prospects. Robert Jr. and Bader, my gut kind of tells me one of those guys will be here. But they have to add an outfielder. I mean, look at the 40-man roster right now. They don't have – right now, if the season started tomorrow, luckily it doesn't, Taylor and Bench are starting. And I don't think that's fair to Carson Bench or even fair to us to look at him now coming off of a year in which he had the fast rise, performed at AA, did not perform at AAA, and just assume he's going to be an everyday player right off the top. I think you need to give him a chance to earn that. That would be my thought. One other thought, and I do want to give this more time. I think a lot of us have to give this more time. Maybe we'll do a whole episode on it. My gut feeling right now about the lineup, about how I would line this up, is still Juan Soto leading off. I'm not off of it. I'm not. I know Juan Soto is going to get on base 42% of the time. Yeah, that's right. I think his on-base percentage will be higher than it was a year ago. So I would hit Soto 1, Bichette 2, Lindor 3. That's kind of like my starting point on this lineup. The 4, 5, 6, you want to go Semien 4, Polanco 5. something of that nature. But the one thing most of us should agree on is that the first three hitters in this lineup, in whatever order you want to come up with, is Soto, Lindor, Bichette. My gut, a few days after signing Bo Bichette, is for it to be Soto 1, Bichette 2, Lindor 3. By the way, Hoff, I know you've always been a big fan of Harrison Bader. Are you now ready to endorse him as the outfielder they should add for this team?
I mean, what took you so long? Of course. This was my number one choice the whole offseason was Harrison Bader. Now, I think this does scream right now, though. Like, they need to make an upgrade. Like, no matter what you want to say, even just for a bench purpose, you have to sign somebody. And I got to be honest, I'm not very interested in Austin Hayes. You saw Harrison Bader last year. He takes it personal, you know? And I think if the Mets offer him something nice to bring him back, he will pay back every team he ever played for. And at this point in time, he plays for a lot of different teams. And he'll go up against the Phillies a couple times, and he will send them home packing. And that's what I want to see. Plus, I still think that he's one of the best defensive outfielders out there. So
he is. No. I have never said a negative word about Bader's defense. The way he glides in the outfield has been something to watch. Not just his time with the Mets, but even when he was with the Yankees, he's kind of a joy to watch defensively. So he absolutely brings that. And for a team that talks so much about improving defense and run prevention, as the line David Stearns had, Harrison Bader does that. He does that because he also puts Tyrone Taylor, who's a really good defender when he plays, in left field. He also gives Carson Bench, who I think is projected more as a corner outfielder, more of a natural role playing left field. So I think the defense is improved at multiple positions by bringing him in. And look, I'm not going to have the bar that he's going to match last year's production, but if he could just be suitable, I think the defense is enough. So I think he makes a lot of sense. I'd be really curious. Maybe you can use your connections to find out what's his ask right now. Like, what is Harrison Bader looking for in free agency? So my projection, I could be far off. What do I know? Is 2 years, $30 million with an opt-out after year one. So I give him the protection of a 2-year deal, and I give him that chance to opt out if he has another big season, which I think would enhance his value.
Would you be desperate enough to say, hey, listen, we'll give you $20 million for 1 year?
Yeah, I'm not against any short-term deal, high AAV. I've said that about Bo Bichette because I know that there's been this, how could you pay Bo Bichette $42 million? How could you pay Kyle Tucker $60 million? If you have the money and a willingness to spend it and not put any self-imposed cap on yourself, then I'm all for it. Then I've got no issue with it. Let's get to the starting pitching real quick, because obviously this is, I laugh because this is the aspect of the team that most people wanted to see upgraded. And so far, middle of January, it has not been touched. It has not been negatively touched. Kodai Senga hasn't been traded. It hasn't been positively touched. I keep going back and forth on Freddie Peralta because if you add Freddie Peralta to this rotation, it changes everything. It just changes everything. First, you add yourself close to a legitimate ace, a guy who last year pitched like an ace, a guy whose track record is, if he's not one, he's like a smidge below one. You also acquire him making very little money, only $8 million, in a contract year. So there's a level of confidence that you just acquired for 1 year an ace-like pitcher. And I think it makes everyone else look different. All of a sudden, maybe the pressure's a little bit off Nolan McLean. All of a sudden, Clay Holmes can be viewed as a fourth starter. David Peterson can be viewed as a fourth starter. So I love it in the short term. My fear has been what you have to give up for a guy who's likely gone after 1 year. And I've said this before, if David Stearns likes Freddie Peralta enough to where he is open to legitimately giving him a 6 or 7 year contract, because that's likely what it's going to take, if not more, in free agency, then trade for him. Then I will have less of an issue including Brandon Sproat. I'll have less of an issue including Jonathan. Because even though those guys have a chance to be really good, you're adding someone in the prime of his career who is really good. Not could be really good, is really good. But I'm not comfortable dealing those players unless you believe that you will legitimately try to re-sign the man at the end of 2026. But as I've said before, I said this about Tucker, Bichette, all that. In the immediate aftermath of trading for Freddie Peralta, I'd be very excited because it does change the short-term outlook on this Met rotation. As far as the Dodgers are concerned, because the LA Dodgers are linked to Freddie Peralta, everybody's got to calm down. And here's why you should calm down. The Los Angeles Dodgers, repeat after me, the Los Angeles Dodgers are the best team in baseball. The Los Angeles Dodgers are far and away the best team in baseball. There is not a thing the Mets can do to change that. Not a thing. They could trade for Tarek Skubal. They could sign Cody Bellinger. They could do whatever they want. And while we'll feel good about the team, they will not be on paper as good as the LA Dodgers. If the rich are going to continue to get richer, which they already have with stealing Diaz from us, with signing Kyle Tucker, with potentially trading for Freddie Peralta or Tarek Skubal, it doesn't change the fact that the LA Dodgers will go into any series against any team as prohibitive favorites. So if they get him, to me, it is much less damaging than the Phillies getting him, than the Braves getting him. Dare I say him staying is more damaging than him going to the LA Dodgers. Why, you ask? Because all of those teams, the Braves, the Phillies, the Brewers, the Cubs, we're competing with them. We're on the same playing field as them. I'm not saying the Mets are better. They are not better, in my opinion, than the Philadelphia Phillies, but we're not 50 miles away. A trade like that can change the impact. It can change how far away the Mets are from those teams. The Dodgers are a million miles away from us. They're a million miles away from everybody. They also have a super rotation. Like, only one guy can start at a time. So they have Yamamoto and Sasaki and Snell and Glad. I mean, it's absurd. And I'm not complaining about it. I'm merely saying if they trade for Freddie Peralta, don't cry about it. Because I'll argue it is better for us, for the Dodgers to just get more stupider and more richer than for the Phillies to get better, or the Braves to get better, or the Brewers to maintain their goodness. And here's the other thing. I said this all last year, even though it turned out to not be the case. And I will say it again. Baseball is not the NBA. Baseball is not even football. The better team doesn't always win. The better team, most of the time, doesn't win. And I would compare that to every other sport. The better team doesn't always win in those sports. I'm not saying that, but they win at a higher percentage than baseball. Why? The best of five, seven, as compared to football where it's one game. But also, crazy stuff happens. We've seen it all the time. So while the LA Dodgers are a million miles better than everybody else, and they could break records this season, they could win 120 games. I have no idea. In fact, go do it. Go win 120 games. There is no guarantee that in the best of five, they're going to beat the Diamondbacks, which we saw a few years ago. Or in a best of five, they're even going to beat us. I will take my chances. I think we all would feel that way because the Dodgers are far superior. But the better that they get no longer phases me in terms of them getting better. Like, I was upset we lost Tucker and I was upset we lost Diaz, but it's more because we didn't get them. The Dodgers are better. We have to accept that. If they trade for Freddie Peralta, we could cry all day. First of all, if they trade for Freddie Peralta, here's the difference between that and free agency. They had the prospects that appealed to Milwaukee. I'm also really skeptical that the Brewers are going to trade Freddie Peralta to the Dodgers. I think that the Brewers expect to compete again. They expect to be good again. When they traded Corbin Burns, they expected to be good again, and they were. I don't know if they're going to load up another team in their league, which is why I think the Yankees and the Mets make similar offers for Peralta, and the Brewers are kind of on the fence. They're both good. I think they'll lean towards a Yankee offer because I don't think they want to help a team inside their league. They showed that with Corbin Burns. We'll see if they show that with Freddie Peralta. But for me, like I said, I'm good with trading for him, but I need there to be a commitment to trying to re-sign the player. If not, don't waste our time. The guy who I think makes the most sense in free agency right now is Lucas Giolito. I've talked about him a little bit over the last couple of Ricos. I've warmed up to it because even though he's not an ace, he is not an ace. I don't believe there's an ace in free agency. Framber Valdez is good. He has been one of the most solid pitchers in baseball over the last half a decade. There is some concern about what he looks like on a long-term deal, and I think that's what he's going to get. Look, if the Mets can bring Valdez in on a 2 or 3 year deal, great. I'm skeptical they're also going to do that because of the compensation they have to give up draft pick-wise. In the case of Lucas Giolito, he's an innings eater. And one thing the Mets missed last year wasn't necessarily an ace, it was reliability. It was the fact that every single start would be 3-4 innings, and it would go on day after day after day, with David Peterson truly being the one exception. And that wears on your bullpen. So if Lucas Giolito is taking the baseball every 5 days, even if he's not an ace, but every 5 days he's pitching into the 7th inning, that is a huge help. That's a difference maker. And that's what this team needed. So I look towards 2026 and I say they could use that. I want to read you an email, and this is for all the David Stearns haters out there, which I guess I've been a part of over this offseason because I have not loved the handling of Pete Alonso and the handling of some of these moves. But this is a really well thought out email by Nick in which he takes every negative Stearns point. We'll call this the Beningo points because Joe has been as tough on David Stearns as anybody. And this guy, Nick, tries to refute all of them. So you guys ready for that? Can we be open-minded about it? I'm going to be open-minded about it because I've been tough on David Stearns. Some of the things in this I said. So let's see if Nick could change our mind. It's a long email, but let's go point by point. Evan, I feel like people have been misunderstanding David Stearns all winter and tantruming over a team that's going to win the NL East. I was right about Bo Bichette, and I think I understand what he's up to. Sorry, this is wordy, but I think it's worth it to make a case for my guy, our guy, David Home Run Stearns. So he will give you a quote of criticism and then respond to it. So, for example, the first one is, the boy wonder is clueless. Joe Beningo is right. They should have signed Pete. Oh, the pain. Our 40-year-old boy wonder improved the D up the middle, swapped 3 strikeout goblins for 3 guys who don't kill rallies, deepened the pen, brought in multiple team leader game typers, and developed our best farm system since the 1980s without any high draft picks. He also just traded for more international draft pool money and let 2 guys walk with QOs so he could sign guys with QOs without losing picks. Well, he only let 1 guy leave with the QO, and that was Edwin Diaz. Am I missing anybody else? Yeah, Pete did not have the qualifying offer. Anyhow, point number 2. What's the plan, though? He has no plan. It's just common sense roster construction. Get better up the middle, bring in run producers who won't kill rallies, and improve the quality of the pitching staff. The offense is unpredictable. The offseason is unpredictable, so he likely just isolates guys who fit the plan and plays chess until a piece is available, preferably without giving up top prospects. Pivots are just moves based on situational opportunities, not always a plan B. If you know what you're looking for, the pieces you need will eventually be there. But he said run prevention, and guys are out of position. The pain. Stearns says he wanted to prioritize run prevention isn't him saying it's his only priority. He brought in a Gold Glove to replace McNeil at second, and now we have elite D up the middle. That's your run prevention. He never said he was building the 99 Mets. Pete and Nimmo, our guys, Evan. It's our guys, the polar bear. The Karens in our fan base couldn't wait to get rid of Pete last year. Rallies dying on the vine was a big reason we didn't make the playoffs. They both take up prime real estate in the lineup and are literal strikeout machines. Bo Bichette is a panic move. He's got no plan, Evan. Why didn't he offer Pete that money? Look at Pete versus Bichette, and you can see exactly what Stearns is doing to address the offense. There are 3 stats on Baseball Reference that help paint this picture in a relatable way. BR, the total number of runners on base when a batter comes up, and the BRS percentage, the total number that's scored because of his at-bat productive outs. With runners on base in 2025, Pete Alonso had 502 base runners, 17.9% BRS, that's the total number that's scored because of his at-bat, 36.8% productive outs. Bo Bichette, 364 base runners, which is a far lower number. And a lot of that is Juan Soto, obviously. I'm just editorializing real quick. Bo Bichette, 364 base runners, 21.2% BRS, 24.1% productive outs. Essentially, Bo hit 361 and Pete hit 240 in, quote, non-frustrating rally-killing at-bats. Bo gets his RBIs by driving in base runners and keeping rallies alive. Pete gets his mainly through home runs. What if Pete Alonso was on the 25 Blue Jays and Bo Bichette was on the 25 Mets? The Blue Jays, Pete Alonso, 162 games, 38 home runs, 114 RBIs, 162 strikeouts. A Mets Bo Bichette, 139 games, 18 home runs, 109 RBIs, which is essentially the same, and 91 strikeouts. In 139 games as a Met, Bo Bichette would have nearly matched Pete's total in RBIs if he played 162 games for the Jays. This is to show what Bichette can produce even if he misses time with Soto and Lindor behind him, while showing how much of Pete's production is having those two guys on base. The games Bichette misses will still have a hitter taking those at-bats, so we're essentially getting the same RBIs from Alonso's position in the lineup, but in a way that allows us to keep scoring. I think that's well written and well said. Obviously, taking the emotion out on what Pete has done for the New York Mets and the fact he's been a Met his entire career. Bo Bichette has a chance to produce the same amount of runs in a very different way. We talked about this a little bit on the last Rico. Bo Bichette is different. Like, you compare their numbers, I think overall, Pete is slightly better offensively because he hits a lot more home runs, but Bichette hits for a higher average over the course of his career, a much higher average. He's a very much a clutch hitter. We certainly saw that last year and saw it in the World Series. Guy had a home run against Ohtani in Game 7, which was freaking legendary, even though it didn't work out. So he is a very productive player, just in a very different way than Pete Alonso. Now, Nick isn't done. He's doing a good job, I think, of trying to change people's opinions. Maybe it changes yours, maybe it doesn't. But the pitching, how are we going to win, Black Dynamite? That's for Hoff. That's for you. I don't know what Black Dynamite means. Anyhow, this team is already light years better than last year's. I can't agree with that, by the way. I mean, there's a few things I don't agree with, but I'm open-minded. Light years better than last year. Okay. Every aspect of this team is at least a little bit better than what we had at any point last year. We still need to raise our floor by getting a dependable guy in left field and a dependable starter, preferably at the top. But as is, we're not fully appreciating what we have. All our starters are healthy. We didn't have that at any point last season. Two guys have ace potential, McLean and Senga. Two are number 3 starter types, Peterson and Holmes. Two guys could be mid-rotation arms, Minaya and Sprout. Plus, we have the 7th best pitching prospect in Major League Baseball, Jonah Tong. And whatever Christian Scott is on, stand by. Every pitching staff not named the Dodgers has question marks, just like we do. The pen has no Diaz, but we have a deeper pool of arms in both depth and ceiling than last year. Tell Joe that Stearns knows what he's doing. By the way, I'm not telling Joe David Stearns knows what he's doing because he will lose his mind. Here's the thing for Joe and for any other Met fan who, because I think I'm similar to a degree. Like, I was angry when Pete's gone. I still am bothered that Pete isn't here. But I also realize that there's nothing I can do about it. I mean, I could scream and yell, and I'll continue to bring it up the way I've continued to bring up Jacob deGrom, but I also know that it's over. It is what it is. The decision was made. We'll have a chance to kind of reevaluate it when the contract is up, I think. I'm waiting for deGrom's contract to be up. We got 2 more years. Trust me, there's going to be a whole damn Rico on that. And then we'll know. Right decision, wrong decision. But the difference is I am now looking at this team in the new prism of what they currently are. I think for a lot of fans, and I think Joe's one of them, they got to go out and win. They're not going to sit here in March and try to figure it out. It's going to be go win some games. And if the Mets are 22-10, as disappointed as many will still be about the guys that you like not being here, we're all here to see our team win. We're all here to see that. And even if the Mets are now creating a short-term contract team where Bo Bichette's great and then he's gone, and then Kyle Tucker's here in 2 years for a year, and then he's gone. If that team wins, and I'm talking about wins, the ultimate prize, of course I would take that over Pete Alonso being a career Met and Brandon Nimmo being a career Met and us not winning. I want to see them win. Now, in this moment, do I think they're going to win? No, probably not. But That's the game changer for those that don't want to be open-minded right now. Go out and prove it by winning. And obviously, there's a long time before any of that stuff can actually happen. But I'm not kidding you. You write that down on the calendar. When DeGrom's contract's up, we'll relitigate the decision to let Jake go. And when Pete's contract's up in 5 years, we'll do the same. But I think for a while, there's going to be a lot of comparisons. But what's healthy is to realize that as much as we appreciate the player and as much as some of us are still upset that he isn't here, it's a different team now, and we want them to be successful. Anyhow, we appreciate the emails. We will continue to go through your emails on Future Rico, so you can contact us, thericob@gmail.com, thericob@gmail.com. I also want to leave you with this thought from Baraf. Baraf wanted to shout out Hoff because about a week and a half ago, for the first time ever on the Rico, we took phone calls. And as I said at the time, it was really cool, but it was really for our live YouTube audience, because if you download the Rico on Spotify or wherever you download your podcast, the Odyssey app, you're not listening live. So that caller segment, while maybe entertaining for you, you get no benefit from it. You're not getting a special treat. So Barath says, for us podcast listeners, what if we create an annual Rico Brogna Fantasy Baseball League? Hoff and Evan face off against 10 listeners. I get one because of my idea. If the winner is a listener, they get a spot the following season to defend their title. How can we make this happen? Barath, we're going to make this happen. I know this has been talked about before, the idea of a Rico Brogna Fantasy League. I think we're going to do it. The only thing I need feedback on is, should it be a keeper league? Actually, it can't be a keeper league. If we're going to change owners year to year, to be fair, it can't be a keeper league. So it's a year-long fantasy league, which, by the way, I haven't done in a long time. The fantasy league I play with Hoff has been a keeper league for over a decade. So going into a non-keeper format would be weird, but I think it's a great idea. And so, Barath, what we'll do is Hoff and I will game plan, and you, everyone out there as well, on ideas. And come early March, we'll have a special drawing. We got to make it as fair as possible. And we will have 10 lucky people compete in a Rico Brogna Fantasy Baseball League. It is on like Donkey Kong. It's a great idea, Barath. And yes, it's really 9 spots because you will get an automatic bid. Congratulations on that. Anyhow, you can email us to ricob@gmail.com. Couple of Ricos to look forward to over the next few weeks I want to get into. Number 1, the Pete Alonso tribute will go down. Number 2, putting a nail in the Edwin Diaz trade where it ranks in Mets history. We will certainly get to that. And number 3, and this is going to be an emotional one, we are going to rank and go through all of the free agent losses of guys we loved in Met history. We obviously went through that this season with Pete Alonso. I'm not going to rank it yet. I think that one is kind of on the side, but we're going to go through all of the other ones, the circumstances, how it actually worked out, because sometimes our emotions cloud if it actually worked or not, how the player did, and where that ranks in comparison to the Pete Alonso loss. So those are a few Ricos to look forward to over the next few weeks. Plus, we continue to react to this offseason and how it plays out. Thank you very much for listening, downloading, and subscribing to another edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.